So it's on to question 4, and that's from Gary Steeden. Gary, thank you very much for your question. And Gary is asking, what is bounce on the golf club? What does bounce represent? How do we use bounce, etc., etc.? So we'll have a look at that now. And simple enough, bounce is the angle which is created from the back of the grind of the golf club here to a forward angle to the leading edge. So if I measure from the bottom of the golf club as it sits in this position, you'll be able to see that the leading edge is sitting up in this position here, and that's the bounce angle. So the angle between the bottom of the back edge here and the leading edge. Now this is my 58-degree club, and it carries lots of bounce, 12 degrees, and the reason why is because when I play bunker shots, I want the club to come in on the bounce, then the club will go into the sand and it will glide along on the bounce and bring the ball out. And that's why sand wedges are more popular to have higher bounce angles, unless you're playing from bunkers that don't really have much sand in them. So that's the bounce angle of my 58-degree club, which I class to be my lob wedge stroke sand wedge. Excuse me. So this is my 52-degree club, and that one carries a bounce angle of 9 degrees. It's a lot less, and I like to play this from tighter lies. And sometimes to reduce the bounce on this club while I'm on the course, I may have to lean the club forward to get the leading edge closer to the ground. That's really, really important when I'm chipping, and I don't want the club to bounce off very hard turf. And then my pitching wedge, that has very low bounce, 5 degrees. And as you can see, that one sits a lot flatter to the ground, and I don't have to move the handle much forward to allow the bounce to become almost zero. Lob wedges also come in very, very low bounce angles because people may not use those in the bunker all the time. But certainly for my sand wedge, as I've shown you, the leading edge sits up a long, long way. Now, if I were trying to hit a lob shot or open the club face, that would actually increase the bounce angle even more. So I do have a lob wedge, which is 60 degrees, and that one only carries a bounce angle of 5 degrees. And that's because I want the leading edge to sit very close to the ground. So for more information on bounce angles, you should really come and see us in the shop. Check them out. Check what you've actually got in terms of bounce angles on your clubs, and then we can take it from there. We have lots of demo clubs in wedges that have lots of different lofts, lots of different bounces. But if you're using a club in the bunkers which doesn't have much bounce, that really may be causing a problem, because you need the bounce to keep the golf club from digging in too much, glide along the sand and bring your ball out a lot easier. So I hope that answers your question, Gary. Let's move on now to question 5. So moving on, question number 5 today, and that's from Gordon Keemer. Thank you, Gordon. I hope you're well. And that's all about stack and tilt. Well, stack and tilt is a method which has been around some time now. And Gordon's asking the question, stack and tilt seems to be making a bit of a comeback. Is it popular? Is it something that we should be taking notice of? I would class as a very, very conventional coach. And I believe that people should have great basics. So if you have lessons with me, you'll be taught to have a great grip, aim properly, stand properly, have a great posture, and do things from the basics that will make you a good golfer. Now, Stack and Tilt is not advocating that you shouldn't have great basics, because it probably is, but Stack and Tilt is not teaching people how to play golf. Stack and Tilt is an evolving swing position that's taught to people who can already play. And I think that's probably the best way that I can put it. It's a method which was derived from people who are hitting the ball left, and this is an anti-left method. So do I agree with it? Not really. There are some very, very good things that Stack and Tilt coaches will talk about. And one in particular that I would take away is the contact point of the golf ball. So the fundamentals behind Stack and Tilt, certainly one of them is contacting the ball in the same position all the time. Well, with your irons, I think we would be under no illusion whatsoever that that's exactly what we would try to do. Ball first, then the ground. But the way that Stack and Tilt method would teach you to do that is to not have any form of weight transfer at all. Right leg straightening, it's quite complicated. And as I say, it's probably taught to people who are established golfers already. So it's a great question, and you could probably go on all day about the various different pros and cons of Stack and Tilt. But I think to put something like that to bed, from my point of view, is that I think that we have kids coming up these days who are so naturally talented and swing the club their way, and it's great to see. If you look at someone like Victor Hovland, the European chap at the moment, plays his own way, always has done, and look where he's got to. He's now won on the PGA Tour. Absolutely fantastic. Take our own Sandy Lyle. Sandy Lyle won 2 major championships with a swing which was all his own, nurtured by his father, taught him great basics. But did he swing the club conventionally, or did he have an anti-something swing? No, he didn't. He just hit the ball the way that he wanted to. And he went on to win 2 major championships and have an incredibly long career, and still plays regularly well now on Seniors Tour. So wonder what would have happened if Sandy Lyle would have been taught Stack and Tilt as a 14-year-old. We just don't know. And it's very likely that Sandy Lyle would never have gone on to win anything at all. Aaron Baddeley, who was one of the pioneers, taken on by a coach during a bad time in his career where he was hitting the ball left, was taught Stack and Tilt, and in the end his swing became so left-sided, so tilted, no weight transfer, no rotation behind the ball, that they had to give him a 15-degree driver to get the ball in the air with his driver. So it has its own complications, and it's not for me, but it could be for lots of people. And I think if it is your method, you need to go with it and see where you get to. But I'm afraid it will be not really be something that I'll ever be teaching anyone at Tandridge. Question 6 comes from Ali Graham. In actual fact, I've got a couple of questions, question 6 and question 7 from Ali. The first one is Ali is complaining his head is dipping in the backswing down towards the ball, and can we fix it, and how do we go about doing just that? So good question, Ali. And obviously I've not seen you swing for some time, but I know you're a good player. So you clearly have a good eye for the ball, and you're able to compensate for that movement. So obviously you must be then coming up in the downswing. So remember, you've gone down, you've had to come up. And we're going to relate to this in our fundamentals. So I mentioned the fundamentals earlier on. So number 1, aim to grip, stance, ball position, posture. But I've always related one more past that 5th to create a 6th fundamental, which is posture maintenance. How do I keep my posture the same during my swing. And if you think about what we're going to do, and I'll show you in a little demonstration on the whiteboard in a minute, if you set up really well, the idea is to rotate around a spine angle that doesn't change. And I'll explain that now. So let's have a look here. And we'll have a look and see a player with a club. Not bad. So there, the spine angle is set and the player's head is in the same position. So if the player now rotates to the top of the backswing, this spine angle must stay the same. In that situation, you can see here that the head would remain in exactly the same position. If the spine were to now change its position and become more vertical, then the head would now go backwards. But if the spine angle increases, the head would now come down. If the head stays in that position, we're in real trouble because we don't have the room to come through. So what happens is the head has gone down. Now it wants to go back up again. But as it comes back up, the shaft steepens considerably. That means that the shaft goes from this angle and it will now go, let's say for instance, it's gone from this angle here. It's now going to be more at this angle here. And as it does that, the club face will close and low pulls and hooks will definitely come from that position. So remember, if the head goes down, it must go up. But what's causing the problem is the change of the spine angle. So if you practice, on the driving range, just remember this. Head position. There we are. Ready to go. Not a very good drawing, that one, is it? But the head position is such. We make a turn and the head stays against that line the whole time. It doesn't break through the line and it doesn't move away from the line. And if you keep your spine in that position as you turn, you won't dip down towards the ball at all. Hope that answers your question, and we'll move on to the next one that you've sent me now. And that question is a question that you've raised about players who are not taking any divots at all. So generally just skimming the ground, just touching the ground. Well, for most clubs in your bag, I'd say that's actually not such a bad thing. But remember this now, the whole idea of having a shorter club in your hand and a steeper backswing is that you're creating much, much more down angle. So whilst I would suggest that from, say, 5-iron down, my divots would be very, very small, very, very shallow, from 6 and upwards, they would start to increase in size and they would start to increase marginally in depth, all the way up to my sound wedge or my wedge, where I would be taking a divot, which would be not huge. We don't want to be scything down on the ball, but the natural angle of the golf club creates a situation where your swing is steeper, so you should be hitting a divot. And for those people who aren't, the best thing to do is to actually get a lesson and see why not. Most common mistakes are that the spine angle has started off at a set angle, like so. During the backswing, the spine angle has increased, so the head is now raised up. And instead of coming back down, it stayed there in that position so that we're not creating a steeper downswing because we've moved our position up into this steeper area. So lots of that could relate exactly to what you were saying with your last question. So if a person is in this position here, remember now, if this is the spine angle at the start of the swing, this is the angle of the shoulders at the top. It would be at 90 degrees. So you can see there that I've created a turn where my left shoulder is well below my right. And with shorter clubs, because they're shorter in the length of the shaft, you're obviously always leaning over more, drivers long, standing up more, and that means that your turn will be less steep. If in doubt, get checked up. But I hope that answers the question, Ali. Let's move on now to question 8.